It's 1890s London, and no matter the number of gas lamps, they'll never be able to lift all of the shadows from the metropolis. A group of junkyard employees encounter a dust devil of a far more dangerous nature than they're used to experiencing, while later the streets of Whitechapel once again run red with the blood of innocents. Could Jack be back? Those are the premises of the two adventures you're going to find inside Cthulhu by Gaslight, Dust and Blood from Chaosium Inc. And I'll be sharing my review right after this. Howdy, gang, and welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. Thanks for joining me once again. Today, I'll be sharing my review of Cthulhu by Gaslight, Dust and Blood from Chaosium Inc. This is written by Karis McDonald and Kevin Ross, and the 120-page hardcover with PDF is available now. Carries an MSRP of $39.99. If you want to grab just the PDF alone, you can do so over at DriveThruRPG for $19.99. Having said all that, let's swing out over to the other camera because here I've got Dust and Blood for Cthulhu by Gaslight. A few things to mention before we get stuck in. First of all, my friends over at Chaosium Inc. were kind enough to provide me with this review copy. But neither I nor anyone else affiliated with the Gaming Gang has received any other sort of compensation for me to share this review with you. It's very important you know that. We're also not going to look at each and every page of the book, but I do want to give you a good feel for what you're going to find inside. And then lastly, a couple of adventures are contained within. So if you're a player and your keeper has picked up Dust and Blood, maybe they just haven't started running it yet. Maybe they're talking about picking this up. Keep in mind, there are spoilers ahead, so I'm warning you right up front. Now, of course, if your keeper has been thinking about picking up this adventure book, let them know about this review. That way they can approach Dust and Blood and make a far more informed buying decision. First thing we're going to do is take a peek at the credits page. A lot of folks worked very hard to bring this to life, so let's give credit where credit is due. So we've got a couple of adventures inside this. First off, we've got Ashes to Ashes, relatively short adventure. Most keepers will probably wrap this up in a single session. You might be able to stretch it out to 2 sessions. I'll discuss that in just a few moments. And then the second adventure is quite a bit longer. It is Signs Writ in Scarlett. So first off, we've got Ashes to Ashes, and this is designed for beginning keepers and players. So there are not as many various different investigative leads for the player characters to follow up on. This is a pretty linear adventure overall. Just pointing that out. Now, it is assumed that the player characters, for the most part, are all going to be employees of a dust yard in London. A dust yard was a junkyard. That was the term for them back in the day. And during the completion of their daily duties, they encounter this man made of dust, this creature made of dust who attacks them in the dust yard. And it turns out that it is the cremated remains of a mummy because this upper class scholar decided that they were going to stick their nose into knowledge that man was not meant to know. And they look to reincarnate this mummy once they've burned it and try to control it, and they don't. So it leads to the death of the scholar. So we also have the valet of the scholar involved with this as well, and he is all concerned about ending up on the hangman's noose for the murder of his employer. And of course, once the player characters become involved, they could make for very convenient suspects to try to pin the death upon. There are some cool things going on in this adventure. I will point out that there's a bunch of information about dust yards in here and the layout of the dust yard, some of which I don't think is really all that necessary for this adventure, but I thought it was kind of cool info nonetheless. I also believe that we've got some opportunities for some fun role play here because the player characters are probably all working class. And of course, late 19th century London, there is a class system that is firmly in place. So what would these people be trying to get into a mansion for? I mean, there's ways to get around it. But like I said, I thought there's some cool opportunities for some really good, solid role play with that, as well as the valet. Now, sadly enough, I think the conclusion of this adventure, well, not necessarily anticlimactic. I feel it's pretty standard stuff. It doesn't really make this adventure to be much of a standout. Also, will mention that, once again, this is an introductory adventure. I don't necessarily know where you would go with these player characters once this adventure is over, because the follow-up adventure here is for experienced keepers, experienced players, and experienced investigators. So you would have a long way to go before you could segue from, say, this adventure to that adventure. But all in all, I found Ashes to Ashes to be okay. Before I start talking about Signs Writ and Scarlett, let's talk about the production quality here. As far as the paper stock, nice heavy weight. We have a stitched binding, so this is going to hold up very nicely. Plus, it's only 120 pages in length, so it's not like it's going to put that much stress on the binding here on the spine. So that's very nicely done. Artwork throughout is okay. Some of the art here, I'll go back here because these are more of the examples of the sort of, I don't necessarily want to say bland, but some of this artwork just doesn't really jump out at me. There's a bit too much of the, oh, hey, this is Victorian life, instead of, hey, this is a horror role-playing game artwork. And you will find that the art for Ashes to Ashes and the art for Signs Writ and Scarlett is quite different. Now, as far as the NPC portraits and the pre-generated character portraits, I think those are very, very nicely done. All in all, I would say artwork throughout is all right. Now, I do like this adventure quite a bit more than Ashes to Ashes. This is a far lengthier adventure. I will mention, once again, this is for experienced keepers and players and investigators. And that's no joke, because for one, for keepers, there are a lot of different factions here. There are a lot of different schedules that the various different actors are on. So each day that passes, different NPCs are doing different things. So you need to track that. And then, of course, you also have to track the murderer, because there's a series of murders taking place once again in Whitechapel. And this is supposed to be taking place probably about a year and a half or so after Jack the Ripper's final victim. So right away, first thing people are thinking, oh, is Jack back? And of course, because it's men being murdered, they quickly realize, well, no, it's probably not the Ripper who's returned. It's probably someone else. I'm not going to get into a whole lot of detail about what's going on in this adventure. It does touch upon past life regression, and I think that is very cool. And the way it's incorporated into this adventure is very, very Lovecraftian. So I dig that. The murderer happens to be someone who is afraid for their life, and they are trying to prevent a creature from beyond time, which is actually a mythos entity, from tracking them down and killing them. So this adventure also provides for a lot of very interesting dilemmas for the players. So how are they going to go about the apprehension of this murderer. And once they very likely do apprehend the murderer, what are they going to do then? Pretty cool stuff. Really like it quite a bit, but it is designed for experienced investigators. So it's very possible that if you don't have the right characters for this adventure with high enough Cthulhu mythos scores, that they will not figure out what is the entity that's tracking this person. Of course, you're seeing some artwork of it. I don't know if that's necessarily going to be a giveaway, but also how they can go about defeating it. So just want to mention that this is not an adventure you're going to roll out with player characters who have been through a couple of adventures. No, you need some pretty well-experienced player characters to get the most out of this and to provide them with an opportunity for success without just handing it over to them and not making them work a little bit to figure out what's going on. So we're going to wrap up with some pre-generated characters here. We have 10 of them. We have some for the first adventure. We've got some for the second adventure. So there we go. Just a peek inside. All right. So that is a look at Dust and Blood for Cthulhu by Gaslight from Chaosium Inc. Let's swing on over to the other camera so I can share some final thoughts as well as my review score. Once again, production quality wise, nice, heavy paper stock. I dig that. It's got a stitched binding. This is not a book that you've got any concerns about falling apart at your game table. It'll hold up very, very nicely. As far as the artwork, it's a mixed bag. Some of it is pretty cool. Other images are just sort of ho-hum. All in all, I would just say it's fine. It's all right. Nothing that's really going to knock your socks off. As far as the adventures, the first, Ashes to Ashes, is okay. There's some cool aspects to it. The finale, I think, is just kind of standard stuff. It's not anything really exciting. Once again, this is designed as an introductory adventure for keepers and players. So it's not as in-depth as you would maybe see with other adventures, which are basically designed for more experienced keepers and players, such as Signs Writ in Scarlett, which I'll talk about in just a moment. But I think if you had the right keeper and the right players, you can have a lot of fun with Ashes to Ashes, especially if they're buying into the whole role-playing aspect where they're working class characters and they're trying to get inside a house in an upper class area, plus that valet. I think you could have a lot of fun with it. If you've got a group that's really not into role-playing and they're just pretty much by the numbers, you might not have as much fun with Ashes to Ashes. As far as Signs Writ in Scarlett, I like that adventure quite a lot more. Although it is very, very important to keep in mind, you do need an experienced keeper, experienced players, and experienced investigators. Because for one, there are different factions. All these factions are doing different things on different days. You've got a period of a couple of weeks that you're playing out. So there's quite a bit for the keeper to juggle. Plus, you also have the player characters and what actions they might be taking that you have to take into account as well. There are clues scattered all over the place. It's going to take experienced players to kind of piece things together to get a better feel for the investigation and to lead them down the right track. And then, of course, you need the experienced player characters because there are certain things like Cthulhu mythos that those investigators are going to need in order to deal with the mythos threat that faces them. But all in all, still like the adventure. I think it's pretty cool. And I think it stands out very nicely. It's got a nice Lovecraftian vibe to it because of the past life regression and some of these strange goings on that take place because of those experiments. So yes, I do like Signs Writ and Scarlett quite a bit more than I do Ashes to Ashes. So, on a scale of 0 to 10, I give Cthulhu by Gaslight, Dust and Blood, a 7 out of 10. I think the second adventure is very well done. First adventure is fine for an introductory tale to bring new keepers and players into the fold. All right, that's it for this time out. If you enjoy the Gaming Gang and would like to support the outlet, you can do so in a few ways. First, by utilizing our affiliate links to the One Bookshelf sites, such as DriveThruRPG. To do so, simply visit thegaminggang.com, click on one of our banner ads. That way, if you happen to make a purchase, I get a 5% commission on that sale. Of course, you can also make a one-time donation by way of PayPal and become a monthly member of our Patreon. You'll find links in the show notes. Also, in those show notes, you're going to find an invite link to our Discord server. It's absolutely free to sign up, so be sure to hang with the gang over on Discord. Of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for our latest in tabletop gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more you are not going to find here on YouTube. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. If you enjoyed the video, by all means, give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already, and if you do subscribe, don't forget, ring that bell. And if you do ring the bell, be sure to click on all notifications, because that way you'll be informed not only when I share videos such as this review, you'll also be informed when my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings right here on YouTube as I share the latest in tabletop role-playing game news and more. Thank you very much for watching. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer, and until I see you next time, I certainly hope all of you get to enjoy plenty of great gaming with your gang.